Well, hi, and welcome back to the show. I am glad you are here. Today, I have a really special guest. Her name is Carly Tatiana Pandža, and she is an actress who's been through my program, Agent Goals. But the reason I wanted to have her on is not just because she had success with the program, but because I'm going to imagine, like a lot of you who are listening, she is a person who's done a lot of self growth. She's a person who is introspective, who takes the time to, grow from change in her life, who is not afraid to look at herself and the way she's showing up in the world. And I'm imagining that, if you're listening to this podcast, you're one of those people as well. And the great poise and grace that she brought to reaching out to managers and agents is something that I wish for everyone. So I'm going to give you a few numbers just to get you started and pumped about her journey. She got 29 meetings with managers and agents and 22 offers for representation, which I think at first glance might be like, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. But I also want you to remember that that also means you're going to have to tell 22 people, like 20 of those people no. And if you can imagine what kind of poise and grace and certainty and confidence in making that kind of decision would need to show up for you, how to show up for yourself in that is a lot of what she shares in this journey. Now, you should know a little bit about her background. She went to Chapman University. She studied film production and screen acting. So she is one of those actors who is also a content creator. In fact, she has her own LA-based boutique at her theater company that is all female owned and operated with the content that's being written, performed, directed, and produced by women. And for her, the hunt for representation wasn't just, I want to get auditions as an actor. It was also because I make content. She actually has a feature-length documentary on Hulu that's called Hair. She made this after she had a successful You Are Not Your Hair head shaving charity where she raised $2,000. So she truly is bringing that content creator and actor self out into the world when she was looking for reps. And how she did that, I think, is such an important part of, really being who you want to be in the business. Too often I find that an actor might be siloing themselves and saying, I can only be an actor, or I can only be a singer, or I can only be a dancer, or I can only do voiceover. And you can really hear in her story how she brought it all together and found that beautiful match team, the team that was excited about exactly all that she had going on. And let me tell you, Carly had some really great things going for her, but she also was really smart in not letting the reps that she eventually signed with single her out just for example, her hair. But I'm going to let her tell you about that in her own words. Full disclosure, she is a graduate of my program, Agent Goals. If you are out there wishing for better representation, I highly encourage you to head over to makeagentswantyou.com and take the free training. It's where it all started. It's where all of these 542 actors got their start before they found representation. All right, let's get into today's episode. So, Carly, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So we are meeting the day after the Oscars. And Carly, I know a little bit about, you created your own list, and can you tell us a little about, you've had a great Oscar experience. It sounds like you've had your own quest to see all the movies. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So for the first time in my life, I've seen all 54 films that were nominated. And I'm really proud of myself. I've always been a huge film fan. I studied film and theater in college. And there's something about, I felt like it was inauthentic for me to watch the show and talk crap about people that shouldn't have won. And I'm like, but I didn't see the other ones. So what am I even saying? And I just go to the movies a lot. So, but when the nominations were announced, I think at the end of January, I had seen 20 of them naturally.
We had a nice head start. You had a nice head start there.
A nice head start, but I barely made it towards the end, but it was fun. It was a fun challenge.
Good. And are there any lesser known films that you're like, everyone, you need to go see this one, that you remember of the ones you saw?
Definitely. I loved Women Talking. It was so extraordinary, and it was snubbed so much. There were no female directors nominated, and there were so many extraordinary female directed films this year, and that's one of them. Another one being The Woman King was so amazing. And Everything Everywhere, swept. And if people didn't know about that, I would have said that one. And I'm trying to think if I feel like it's too big of a question, Brian. There's too many movies bouncing around in my head
I love it.
to
I
continue
love it.
further than that.
Got it. I want to make sure you all know that Carly's not my only guest on the podcast today. It is cuffing season for the Peacocks in Pasadena. So the Pasadena Peacocks, if you don't know, if you've listened to the podcast before and you've never heard this, but I live in Pasadena, and in Pasadena we have wild peacocks that just wander the streets, and people stop their cars and they take pictures. And today they are squawking and squawking to try to attract their mate. So you may hear them cheering Carly on as we get into her agent story today. And Carly, as we jump in, I wanted to just share, can you share the number of meetings that you got and your whole, I would say your perspective on taking those meetings and the way you kind of organize yourself, because that sounds really interesting. I think a lot of actors would never have made some of the decisions you had, and I think they're so empowering. So I'm going to shut up, and will you share a little bit?
Yeah. I had 29 requests for meetings. I did not take all of those. And I took 25 of them. And I told myself, I'm going to give myself this 3-week time frame to have people reply to me, set up those meetings, negotiate. But I wanted to give myself kind of a solid deadline, because I knew that if I let it go further than that, I would get in my head, start to second guess and doubt who I was choosing, why I was choosing. And also it was like right before the Thanksgiving break. And I wanted to be like, I wanted it to be complete and done and let all the people know. And so I let a lot of people know from the beginning. There was people that were like, okay, great. Let's sign, wanting to like bust out the contract, so to speak,
Yeah.
or, pen it right there. And I had to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so flattered. Thank you. I have meetings next week and the following week. I'll have to let you know. And I'm like, oh, I'm that person that's like, I'll have to let you know. But I wasn't a jerk about it. I was being honest,
Yes,
I
I
don't want
love
to
it.
sign with you. I don't know what the meeting's going to be like next week. I don't know what that person's going to be like. I really don't know. So giving myself that opportunity to just experience all the meetings and experience all the people before I made my choice.
There's so much richness inside of that, Carly. I want to just tease it apart just a little bit so everyone listening can really get this. Because first of all, there's such incredible self-care. And I want to be done with this by Thanksgiving, so I can be done with my reach out, so I can have peace in my body and in my world knowing it's decided. And so I'm going to give myself this deadline, which I think is such a powerful thing to take care of yourself in that way. And then I also love this of, in the room when someone's like, I'm gangbusters, let's do this. And you could very clearly I have a way to take care of myself and a way to take care of this person. Very kind, actually, to say, I'm so pumped and I'm taking meetings through this date and I will be able to get back to you by then. And I'm sure in those moments, the first time you did it, were you a little bit like, let's see if I can say this? Or were you really already pumped up before like that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I had really grounded myself before that I was going to give myself until then, but it's still very different doing it for reals versus just
Yes.
in your head. And the first meeting I had, and I want to share this too, because I think it's good to remember. The first meeting I had was the worst of all my meetings. And I knew within a few moments I was a no. My body, everything, I was like, nope. I still, indulge, continue with the meeting. It's not like I hung up or something. It was like, no. But the energy behind that rep was they wanted to sign me right away. And they actually got a little triggered by me saying that, oh, I'm actually taking other meetings. But I remember telling myself though, if somebody gets triggered by that, then they are not the right representation for me. And that is
Beautiful.
everything to do with what's going on with them and has nothing to do with what's going on with me. But it was really cool and empowering to, after that first meeting, not be like, I guess all of them are going to be this way. Oh, I was like, oh, that's weird. I'm like, I think it's kind of good that the first one was a little wonky. That was just my dress rehearsal. I was just tripping around. I'm missing my marks and it's fine. But all the other ones were extraordinary. So I
That's
was like,
amazing.
that's just,
Yeah, that's amazing. And what I hear inside of that, and I want everyone to notice is Carly didn't make it about herself, right? That's the gift inside of this is like, this person had their thing and like, that is them. So my next one isn't going to be exactly the same. It's so important that let's say it's on their side of the street and not on your side of the street. And I just love that that was your
Mhm.
impression there. Can you tell me, one of the reasons I love when an actor takes a lot of their meetings, sometimes I'll see an actor, they'll say they didn't do it the same way you did. They may have gotten a bunch of load meetings and they got a bunch of meetings and then they turned half of them down. They only took a part of them. You took the majority of your meetings, a huge
Mhm.
majority of your meetings. What did it teach you to take the meetings even when you knew it was a no for you? What gift did it hold for you?
Well, first of all, it was really great practice in me being who I want to be and who I know I am and who I'm creating myself to be in my career. So for me, there was no waste. It was, well, this is just great practice for me to talk about myself, share about myself, get comfortable with asking for what I want, asking for clarification, dealing with a personality that might not be, perfectly, I perfectly gel with this person and it's super easy. And for me too, like after only like a couple of meetings, I think for me, the program was so extraordinary because of so much the contextual transformation and the inner work and not necessarily just what I actually did. Every person that I met with, I was relating to them. This sounds like so duh, but I was relating to them as people, as another human being that had hopes and dreams and were doing their job and they had their intentions that they were trying to fulfill. So there were so many people that I loved that weren't right for me that I authentically, when I said, thank you so much, I'm going a different way, was like, can we please stay in touch? And I meant it. Like I actually felt this camaraderie of we're
Mm-hmm.
on the same playing field. We're doing this together. We're all in this together. High School Musical.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought of that phrase. But and I wanted to keep in touch with them, but not from this like creepy strategic, what are you going to do for me in my career kind of way. From this like, I can help you and you can help me. And like, let's stay in touch because like I'm right here and you're right here next to me. There's no like, you're above me and I'm down here or I'm above you. Like it really was that. And in the process of having those meetings and talking to those people about myself, I feel like I study a lot about like brain science and the law of attraction and what it is to do patterns and habits. It's like it can't hurt just to fire on those neurons a little bit more, me being that way, because I haven't been practicing being that way. So having those amount of meetings was like, for me, just like, oh, this is just like, I'm just doing another mile because I'm getting ready for the marathon. Like, this is like, how could it hurt? It can't at all. There's
Yeah.
people that like still email me, like, cause they added me to their newsletter because we're staying in touch, you know? Like,
Yeah. That is wild. And I mean, it's wild and it's not wild. So what I think to most of us, it sounds radical, but I actually think it's the truth of
right?
what the program. Yeah. Right. Why is this radical? This shouldn't be radical. This should be the way it all is. But what I hear inside of this, and I want to make sure no one missed this, is you didn't become dumber because you became more loving in your meetings. You became smarter because you became more loving in your meetings. And I think most people would say, well, if I'm really just there to be present and create a connection, I'm not going to be sure I'm asking the right questions, or I'm not going to be knowing if they're the right match for me, or knowing if you are at your most bestest, smartestest, decision makingest brain when you are present and you are with the person in front of you. And we talk a lot in the program, and I think this probably aligns with what you've heard of your brain science, and you can tell me if there's a connection here at all. But if you go into the meeting with the question in your head, you're not able to be yourself. If you go into the meeting with I'm here to meet a person, and then you can ask the
Mm-hmm.
question later, like the question of should I work with them? It hangs in the meeting. It's like a cloud, I think, that keeps you away from like, let's be real people. Because my ultimate goal is that any actor finds any rep, whether you use this program or not, is able to call that representation when things are crappy on set, or they're asking you to do something you don't want to do, or you're thinking about leaving them and you can still have a normal human conversation with them about like, I want you to be, I always think of like, plan for the toughest conversations in the relationship and you will be picking the right matches sometimes. Does this resonate at all with kind of how it worked out for you?
Yeah, definitely, because it's so funny. It wasn't just for me about the statistics of and the logicalness of who that person is. Because of course I looked at that, right? But I got really clear for me about what I wanted in a relationship with a rep. And I also checked in with myself during the meetings and also right after the meetings. I did a debrief after every single meeting, which made like such a difference because it's so, especially, I had 25 meetings. So to try to reflect after all of those 3 weeks, it's like there were some people I wouldn't have been able to remember, that like I chose someone that I met in my first week and people that I met in my third week. So it's like, and there was
Yeah.
all sorts of like different flavors in between. So it's like I had to look for myself and say, like after the meeting, like what was for me, it wasn't just about the stats, but what was my experience in the meeting? And I was like, ooh, I felt safe. I felt really
Yeah.
seen. I felt
Love
really
that.
recognized. I could start to hear the difference, Brian, between, it's funny, like I don't know if you're familiar with human design, but it's another modality that I love to like play around with. And for all those projectors out there where feeling seen and recognized is really, really important and like waiting for that invitation is so important. I, it was really important for me that I felt seen in the meetings, but not from this superficial place. So there were people that like, there were reps that the whole time they were talking were like, all I could hear in the background was, oh my God, like your look, it's a gold mine. We're going to make so much money together, which I want to make money. I'm not against making money, right? But I could hear the difference between the reps where all their attention was on my look and like how much money we were going to make. And it was almost like this transactional. It felt a little slimy versus the people that they saw all of me. I could
Hmm.
feel the difference between
Hmm.
they see all of my talent. They're not just speaking to my look. Obviously, I know that I have a very specific look. They know it. Talked about it in my email. I'm not going to deny that. But the people that talked about like, oh my gosh, you're a content creator. Oh my gosh, look like you're classically trained.
Hmm.
Like they spoke to the, like, I felt seen for all of who I am versus like being a piece of meat, like being like,
Yeah.
oh, like you're just
Yeah.
like, it's just the look. So it
Yeah.
was so important for me to like notice that in the meetings and immediately write it down for myself. So when I was making the choice, because yeah, I got a little like messed up about like making my choice, like, cause there were so many great people. And I think here's the thing that's so great though, is like the transformation that I had of becoming who I've always wanted to become, or like being who I've always been, but just never allowed myself to be, is no one's going to take that away from me. No
Mm-hmm.
one can take that away from me.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it works out with whatever reps that I chose or not, because sometimes you don't know until you start working with somebody.
Totally.
Like you
Yep.
might not know.
Yeah.
So there's no fear over here with me of like, oh my God, like what if it doesn't work out? Oh my God, what if I made the wrong, like it literally got to this point where I was like, I could always do this again. I'm clear about who I am. Like, I'm clear that I could have a conversation that could make a difference. Like,
Yeah.
then it didn't work out. Then I made a mistake. Big whoop. Keep going. Who
Yeah.
hasn't made a mistake? So it's like that, I think, is the most powerful thing, is like who I became for myself and owning what I'm owning in my career. That like is invaluable. Like it's not just that I got like, because actors get like, you get the reps and like, yeah, it's extraordinary, but it's like, it's not like you get reps and like magic. Now it's like sunshine and rainbows and you don't have to do any more effort or like, it's not that. So, but like to never know that I'm never going to lose the like, oh, this is who I am. And that like kind of beingness that has me own my career and know my value no matter what, and get that like, yeah, I don't need a million people to offer me to rep me. I just need that one person that gets it. And that's right for me. Like, I don't need like a bunch of people to validate me. And the few people, and I don't mean this in like a cocky way, the few people that didn't offer me to represent me, I was like, oh, well, then I definitely don't want you to represent. Like, you know what I mean? Like, who wants someone who
Please,
doesn't
please
want
don't.
them? Like,
Please don't. Yes.
it wasn't personal. I was like, yeah, those people that didn't offer, I was on that same exact wavelength. Like, I could tell that they weren't a right fit and they could tell I wasn't a right fit. So it's like, it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
I'm not your cup of tea.
Yes. And that's fine. And what I love, so there's so many things I want to pull apart here that you said. There's so many good things. First, I want to take apart the one thing where you said is like, I gave myself a debrief, and I talk about that inside of the program is like, when you leave the meeting, I know you're going to call your mom or call your best friend or call somebody and say, this is how it went. And like, take a minute to be with your body and the vibes in your body and write down, whether that's in your car or you just turned off the Zoom, like, what did it feel like? How did they make you feel? We asked you the couple questions that I want you to ask after a meeting so that you can remember you're going to get multiple meetings, like you said, especially if you're having these 3 weeks. I could only imagine who was that again? What would she look like? Like, they have to write what they were wearing, even, or check out like who they like. What did they wear? What time of day was it? So you could see who they were, especially with that many meetings. I can only imagine. And then I love what you said again towards the end there around being in the meeting, feeling the energy of the person, and it letting you know, like, if this doesn't work out, the bravery around this doesn't work out, right? Like, reps schmeps is kind of what I'm hearing you say is like, I'm full enough of myself that representation is part of my process. It isn't the answer to my journey, right? It's part of my journey. It's not the answer to my journey, right? And I think that bravery, that courage, we've heard that a few times on the podcast when we talk about this process. Is one of Sharon Shart's episode. We'll link to that in the show notes. But and she goes, by the time I got there, I didn't care if I got signed by manager agent anyway. I was so like full of myself and my journey. She goes, of course she did get it, but she's like, I was so full of myself then that it didn't. I was so sure of who I was and who I was meant to be in the business that it like that was the icing on the cake piece. And I believe that that's part of what makes the actors attractive in this kind of a program, because the agent gets to say, wow, how we're free. Everyone just paint the story of an agent. They hear no all day long. All day long. Their lives are not easy. We think like, oh, agents they just pick these actors and they just send them. Agents hear no more than we do. More than any actor ever does, because they're rejected all day long. I submitted 50 actors for that. I got 0, right? So you have to remember that's right. To have and then the other actors are calling and saying like, why aren't I getting more auditions? That's the path that every actor is calling them and saying, right? And then they meet with an actor who is refreshingly confident, certain, non-delusional. I think that comes a lot from what you said is the contextual pieces of the program that kind of like let you see yourself in the business in a different way. And then they get to go, wow, it would be so lovely to work with someone who is so sure of how they fit in the business and what I can do with them. And I love what you said about making you a piece of meat, because it is the same as someone falling in love with your credits is falling in love with your look. What if Carly decided, I'm going to bleach my hair, I'm going to grow my hair long? Like because if it was only about your look, then suddenly like I have to be this person forever, or if it's all about my credits, I have to continue to book the same kind of credits I've been booking in the past, or I'm only signing you for your special skill, or like that they could see all of you gives you permission to bring all of you to the work that you want. And I think that is such an important thing to notice. And I don't think anyone's actually said that on the podcast before, that piece of it. So I really am grateful for you to bring that part up. That seems really integral to knowing if someone is a match for you, right? It could be so reductive.
For sure.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah. Because then the love is conditional, right? We talk about relationships. It's like any relationship. It's like, oh, like, you're with your, husband or your wife or your partner. And it's like, what if they lose their job? Are you going to be like, oh, bye?
Yes.
It's like, it sounds so silly, but to use that like example of, but yeah, it was really cool for me to be able to experience that of, oh, like, I feel like this person fully sees all of me and not just what I've done so far, but my potential. And, oh, this person, is like, ooh, look at you. Oh, your look.
Yeah.
Your look. I like, there was certain times where like it sounds funny, but it's like, I could see the dollar signs in their eyes.
And you're like, listen, I want to make money too, but does it have to only be about the way I look? Like, I'm sure. Yes, totally get it. Yeah. So one of the things you also said is, and I want to make sure people hear this, is sometimes content creators can get very nervous about reaching out to reps because they're like, well, I only want to reach out to the reps that care about content. And how do I find those reps? And it can become a cycle where they get very lost. Can you talk a little bit about why this was important to you to make sure that a rep got this for you? And a little bit maybe about the content that you create, just so people can kind of see themselves in your story even.
Well, I double majored in film production and screen acting at Chapman University. And so it's theater and film. And I started out just wanting to be a screenwriter director and, discovered the love of theater and felt at home as I met all these weird theater kids. And I was like, oh, like they're not just my friends. Like maybe I want to do what they're doing. And so it was really important to me, even though the focus of the content that I sent out was about my acting, I had my writer, directorness, filmmakerness sprinkled in throughout the email. It
Hmm.
wasn't the
Right.
focus, but it
Right.
was sprinkled in. And it was something that I knew I didn't have to worry about. I knew that we would talk about it during the meeting and it would be one of the
Yeah.
questions that I would bring up. And there were times where, I would talk to a rep and and their thing was, oh, well, yeah, that's great, but we're going to focus on acting. And there was certain things that they said that would let me know they don't fully get me. That's fine. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
they're like, but it's like the ones that I did talk to, like I made an effort to say, hey, and I wasn't being a jerk about it. It's like sometimes people are multi-hyphenates because it's multi-hyphenates. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hyphenates?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's because they had some agent or someone in the industry tell them they should, which I think is ridiculous. It's like, no, do what you want, like what feels authentic to you. But, I would say in the meeting, but I've actually trained extensively in these things. I'm not just someone that, creates skits on TikTok. No offense to anyone who does it. I think that's awesome. But it's like I have two original pilots, three original screenplays. Like, I've directed, short, short documentaries, feature documentaries, theater. So I want someone that also is going to be looking at it from the whole of that. Like, get that, yes, I want to book all the things. And maybe that's going to be the pathway that's going to allow me to direct the feature or allow me to whatever. But I just wanted to make sure that they knew and were connected to that me being an overall storyteller and those talents were really important to me. And I'm actually really good at them. And I could tell the people that dismissed it or weren't interested versus the one that were like, oh, awesome, great. That just even better. That just makes you an even more better package. And I'm like, sweet.
Yeah. And now, what I love about that, Carly, that you're saying, and I want everyone to just zoom in on this because whether you decide to join me for Agent Goals or do it with me or do it on your own, you need to know this. It is impossible to come up with, let me make the list of the agents who care about content and let me make a list of the managers who care about content and only reach out to those people because everyone is allowed to change their mind every single day of the year. So they could one day not care about content and the next day they could. And they might not care about content for certain people on their roster and they might care about it for certain people who have certain kind of credits on their roster. So remember, there's no way for you to zero in on this. And if you tried to, you'd be cherry picking based on maybe the people that you know who happen to get people because they have content. And it's not going to be the net that you need to cast. So I think that's an important part to just to open yourself up to, because what you're saying, Carly, is I made sure that they knew this was a part of me because in my messaging and the way that I crafted that email with you, Brian, like we made sure that they knew writing was something that I cared about, content was something I cared about. And then they would reveal themselves in a meeting to be, oh, this is the person who cares. This person kind of doesn't. Great. And so with that, the worst thing that happens is you take a buttload of meetings where you find a few people who don't care, and then you find ones that do. And I think it's, like the worst, I think that where there's some kind of protection that actors are doing where they're trying to find just the ones who will care about content and actually giving the person permission to reveal themselves, giving them the dignity to say, oh, I'm excited about you because of your content is such a different approach rather than deciding this
Mm-hmm.
is the one that must work for me. I know it's very different than going to the grocery store where you're like, I know what kind of chicken soup I like, and I'm going to pull the one off the shelf. Like we have to not shop for agents like we're shop for chicken soup. Like it is not the same journey. It's like, let me open myself up and allow them to choose me is just a very different approach to take inside of there.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and
yeah.
I think too, if you look at if you think about law of attraction and the energy that you're putting out, for me, where I was in terms of my mindset and who I was being and the energy and the frequency that I was vibrating on when I sent these out was more important than anything for me. Like I literally I booked a session with my law of attraction coach and we did like a meditation and I got super relaxed before I clicked send. the first email. I
Wow. Wow. I
literally,
love that.
for me, like I knew that if where I was like open and happy, that like the exact representation that I was meant to find at this point in my life and in my career, I was going to find, right? So there's also like that aspect. Like sometimes we can get just like so in our mind and so strategic, and it just like shuts down the possibility of finding a San Francisco agent, like finding some person that comes in that I never ever would have contacted if I hadn't have cast this really broad net. And then also maintaining that through the whole process, Brian, it was like, it took something, but it was also, I got really connected to, but this is what I want for my entire life. I don't want to just do this process and then be like, okay, and now I reserve the right to go back to being like kind of about this, and oh, here's my energy, and it's like kind of excited, but like not that really. It's like, no, like I would send my emails, and then if I felt myself starting to get like desperate or like funky or afraid, I'd be like, I gotta go for a walk. I gotta go for a walk. I go listen to my
Yes.
meditation. I gotta go hug my dog. Like I did whatever I needed to do to maintain that like frequency that
Yes.
I like put out when I first originally sent it. And it's also, Brian, like it's the one I've kept maintaining since then. So it literally felt like here's the level that I'm stepping into. I'm up leveling my life, and like, oh wow, like now I'm not going to go back. Like who wants to be like, okay, now I can relax and like my pants and become like whatever. And it's not that I don't want anyone to hear this like you're not allowed to relax, but I mean it in the
Right.
sense of like I not allowing myself or giving myself permission to like, now I'm going to go back to kind of the ordinary ways of thinking and ways of being that I was before that I wasn't happy with. Like, no, like in the stepping into that next level of my career and my life, it's kind of like there's no other choice but to keep operating there and to keep tending to that. It's a lot of self-care, a lot of like,
Yeah.
I made that the most important thing.
Yeah.
Like where I was at about it, my mental mindset.
Yeah.
However you want to interpret that.
Carly, there's so much in that. And I'm just so glad you said this, because what I'm hearing you say is I was being the person that I want to be in the world. And the program kind of gave me some of the rules for doing that. But what I really did is I said, oh, I'm playing this right-mindedness. Let's call it a game for a second for this process I'm doing. And whoa, wait, this is not a game. I want this to be who I am all the time. I'm not going to allow myself to fall back into the muck or the mire of, the stories that I might pick up from other actors in acting class, or like, I feel like that, this interesting, we could have this contagious collective consciousness about the business is hard. And I'm not saying that the business isn't hard at times. That's not what I'm trying to say here. And we're not talking about toxic positivity either, just pretend positivity. This is not pink frosting on a shit cake. This is actually saying, I know when I grab onto those lower thought forms, it does not serve me and it does not attract at the level that I want to attract. And I'm reading this book right now. It's called Leadership and Self-Deception. And it just really taps into this as the way we can deceive ourselves into believing like we're really in our career, or we're really, and so like we can hold up against our career. Like I moved across the country. I live in a small apartment. I've got this self-tape thing taking up the room in my office, and but all the things that have actually nothing to do with being in it. And I am not to say that those are not hard, or that those are something we can interpret those as a sacrifice, but being really in it is, am I in acting class? Am I having a good thought system around the way I relate to representation, the way I represent to casting directors, the way I think about putting myself on tape and what it means to be in my craft? And it's so easy to slide. And I'm not saying we all can't have a rough day, but where you started this, Carly, where you came to is the self-care part of it. And I believe that when the self-care is not there, it's not possible for us to be who we want to be, or it's really tough to be who we want to be when the self-care is not. That's why it's such a huge part of the course, is asking all the time, like, what's going on with your self-care? What's going on with your self-care? Because we both know it's impossible to hold up the stamina of being a buoyant, ebullient, whatever, how you say the word, right? Actress in the world and in Los Angeles, and have the rejection and the, what do I do? And I'm on my own and my self-tapes, and unless there's some form of care. And I love that you're like, I went for a walk. I hugged my dog. Like self-care doesn't always, I think sometimes we think self-care has to look like something big and grand. And actually it could be 3 seconds of loving up on your dog. And oh my gosh, I feel better about so I just love that you said that. That's really important. And then the one other thing that you said here that was so good is this is the right reps for me for right now. Or, meaning like we hope that they are for forever, for sure. But there's something about, I think, like when you do a program like this or when you reach out, like you're going to learn something about yourself in the business right now, about who responds to you. You got 29 people reaching out to you. I know a lot of people might be listening and be like, oh my gosh, 29 people, 29 meetings. That's a lot of meetings to be offered to come in for, right? But we want to be like, where were they? What kind of agents were they? You learn a little bit about like where you fit in by who are those offices. And instead of bucking against like, well, it should be CAA or it should be Gersh or it should be like, okay, cool. And one day it will be for sure. Or maybe you'll be with the same manager your whole life and you'll be on the Oscar stage. So I just really think it's important that we open ourselves up to just letting the business kind of reflect back. Oh yeah, this is where we kind of see you right now without judging yourself against that. This is when I have a lot of actors who will say to me, like, should I even look for agents right now? And I'm like, if you know how to act, it's probably okay to look for an agent because there's an agent out there who wants a totally developmental beginner actor and would love to work with you. Right. We always kind of are reaching for the bigger. And I just think that's an important point to make there. So Carly, you've dropped a few bombs around law of attraction and, what's it called? Design. What's it called?
Human design.
Yes, human design. I knew what it was. Yeah, human design and all.
Have you looked up yours? Because I feel like I've already have predicted what you are.
Okay, I haven't looked at mine, but I've been like super intrigued about it. So do you know what it is? Tell me what you think it is.
You're definitely some sort of generator. I think you might be a manifesting generator. You have a lot of energy, and manifesting generators have like. But anyway, we'll exchange, and then I'll let you know if I was accurate.
Okay. Okay, great. Oh my God, I would love. Okay, great. If there's like a test I can take online, I'm in. I'm ready to do it. Okay, great. We will link to it in the show notes once I find it. And I'll let you all know. So as we say, so you've used this language. So I just would love from your perspective as someone who is clearly invested in her own self-growth. You went to a spiritual university at Chapman as well. So you have a real foundation in this kind of background. Is there anything that you would want to share either about the program or about this from that perspective? Because I've never asked that question before.
Yeah. So to be honest, and I want you to hear this as the acknowledgement that it is, Brian, I love the human condition. I love examining why I do things and looking at the next level of my development and transformation. I used to lead seminars and coach. Like I've coached so many people. So I have all these different modalities and distinctions of ways to look at things and how to coach people and things like that. And for me, I truly believe there's no top to the mountain of my transformation as a person. Like I never am ever, I think, going to be like, I've arrived on the mountain, because that's ridiculous. We're multidimensional, like moment by moment, things are growing, we're changing. And so for me, it's really, I'm very picky about who leads me and who teaches me, because it's really important for me that I witness and I can see that the person walks the walk, talks the talk, is the real deal, is a human. I can just pick up on BS really quickly. And I think it's because I've trained myself so much and I've challenged myself to be the person that walks the walk and talks the talk. So when I stumbled across your work, and I also I asked a bunch of people who had taken courses with you, just the way that you spoke about it, I could tell it wasn't just about here's the actions that you take to, find representation. It was also I could hear the context when you would speak. I could hear the context in the background. And I am crystal clear that it is the context so important.
Yeah.
And I have so many points tested this in my life of you can do all the content, right? All the actions, all the things that people tell you that you should do. And you could do it to the max times 300, 100%. But it does not matter if the context in which you are coming from is not empowering. And if you have not shifted whatever the beliefs that you have or who you've been being. So it did get to this point where I was like, okay, here's someone, I hear that they're talking about content, but I could hear the contextual foundation that was there, where you were coming from, what you had laid. And I was like, okay, I trust him. I see him. I'm being serious. You can go through things in the industry with certain, teachers and leaders and things that people say. And it's, you like, I don't mean this like you have to walk through and like protect yourself. One of the biggest things I got doing your course is like when we did our acting story, I was so raw and vulnerable with the people that I shared with. Like I literally started crying within like a minute. Like I wasn't surprised, right? And one of the kind of feedback things that I got from people was them saying like how they admired my rawness and my vulnerability. And I got so clear, maybe that is a huge aspect of who I am. And I just started like looking for myself. And it sounds so duh to the people in my life, that realization, but not to me, like the blind spot of me not seeing that and being like, oh, I always pretend like I have to pretend like I have it all together and that I'm super strong. But a huge essence and like miracle and magic of what makes me me is that I am the person that says like, this is what I've been struggling with. And oh my gosh, I'm so moved by this Target commercial. Like I cry at like a drop of hat for like everything. But it's like, oh my gosh, this is a huge part of who I am. And it's been one of the things that I've been thinking I need to overcome before I put myself out into the world versus maybe that's the very thing, me protecting and hiding that's been keeping people from actually getting to see me.
Yeah.
And it was like a profound transformation. And I also think like when I participate in things is like, this is going to be so transformational and I don't know what I'm going to get, but I'm going to get whatever I need. And having that kind of perspective throughout the whole course, it's like doing that and then like being able to, it no wonder that was in the background of my email, even though I took out things that like were really vulnerable and things that like, cause we ended up kind of deciding like, okay, that's not what we're going to put in there.
Yeah.
What was in the background was Carly, open heart. Here I am, naked, raw, leave me. And there was so much fear around that versus like going through the process, discovering there was nothing to be afraid of. And that's really the only way to live. And it's that is why we do what we do as performers, as artists, like that juicy, risky, I don't know what's going to happen. Everyone can see me and I'm sharing my truth with the world. Like that's why we do it. So it helped me get in touch with that and like step into that. So it just makes so much sense to me that it's like ever since that, like I got back in acting class again, like scene study, like for the first time since college. Like
Great.
I'm
Good
in
job.
a consistent class now.
Yes.
I literally just registered for female stand-up comedy class, Brian.
Obsessed.
And I've been wanting to do it forever. And it was like, so it was like the commitment and the me saying, this is what it's going to be. But like all the details weren't worked out. There's still like the unknown and then the surrender to it. It's like the reps are just part of it, but it's like, I can feel the momentum and the trajectory of like, I'm just going to keep stepping in and keep expanding, like, because that's just natural when you're on a journey and you discover the thing, if you allow yourself to keep going.
Yeah.
You give the courage
Carly.
to keep going.
Yes. The courage,
Right?
yes. And what, Carly, I'm sure plenty of people are listening feeling like, well, she's so confident and certain and da-da-da. And then I want everyone to hear what Carly's saying is, yes, and it wasn't a front. I'm not saying you had a front, but like, I thought that's who I needed to be in the way that I reached out into the world. And actually, we know based on all the success we've had inside of Agent Goals is the confident, excited, intuit person that exists inside of you is necessary, I think, for the stamina part of reaching out to reps. But actually, we want to give them the spaciousness and the opportunity to get to know that softer part of you, to get to know the vulnerability, especially when, like you said, it is one of the things that came up again in your acting story. And, the mathematics that end up going into what ends up in your email is such a tricky design that comes from all the way back from, when you first knew you wanted to be an actor to what your friends end up telling you that they saw inside of it to how we eventually put the mathematics of that together. But what I think I love you saying is in the background of that, of course, because that's where it started. It started with the truth of your whole story. One of the things that I think I've recently come to notice, because we just passed the 3-year anniversary from Agent Goals, right? And so this is super exciting for us. It's super exciting, right? And so of working and getting actors, agents, and reps all the time. But one of the things I've noticed, this is kind of where I've learned, it's taught me a lot. But one of the things I'll say is, you tell that big actor story piece at the beginning, because at the time you get your manager and agent meetings, you're not going to get to give them the full story, because it would be the weirdest thing in the world if you talked about when you like had your acting teacher in high school and what they said, right? But because you've had that kinesthetic experience of sharing it with other people, I think that by the time you get to those manager and agent meetings, your body doesn't feel cheated for not getting to put it all on the line in that one meeting. So you can walk out of that meeting and say, okay, great, I get to make a decision, because this is going to be a longer relationship where they're going to get to learn more about me. It's a little bit like, I think agent manager meetings are you get one date and then you decide if you're going to get married a little bit in some weird way. And so we needed to be, right. So I just thought of that, but I think you need to be able to have the experience as the actor to feel like I've shared my story, and here is where I'm going to make sure that I present myself, which is kind of how you started today. Is like, I felt like I'm being more and more of the person that I present into the world. So I think that is such a beautiful journey for me to be able to be on witnessing you, Carly, because, it's such a delight when I would ever come to a call and you'd ask a question, because you were clearly fully invested and would come with such a clear, I'm challenged by this. This is stuck for me. I'm stuck right here. And I think that, I love to coach. I think that's pretty obvious that I love to coach, but it's also fun to really coach someone who's like, I've wrestled and I've tried, and here's where I got to figure this out. And to know that you were doing that the deep work on yourself at the same time is, of course, that's why the questions were so powerful and you moved through this so beautifully. So if you could say, I think you probably already answered this, but let's just say, if you had to identify one specific part of agent goals that helped you the most, what would you say that was?
The actor story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about why.
It had me, and like I've done work about like dealing with things in your past, but it gave me a certain framework to look at specifically my acting and my life too, and to see certain things that had happened, and like to look at it, and even the looking at it and acknowledging it to myself, even if I didn't include it in my story, but then like what I did acknowledge to the closest people in my life, right? Even though they're the people that I feel the safest with, like the safest and to have those people say like, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that you had that thing that happened that like stopped you. And to like, it was this like unbelievable, like healing experience where it felt like I got to go back and be like, and like heal each little thing that had happened, and like say to like young Carly, or even like a couple years ago, Carly, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm sorry that happened. Or like, oh, like, can you just have some compassion for yourself and like forgive yourself for that now? And no matter how much you do that as a human, like things will keep coming up throughout your life. And it's so necessary. Like it's so necessary to complete those things and heal those things, because then you don't bring your past into your future. Like, and I know that intellectually, but to have that assignment, and then it's like I got to move through the spaces and experience what it was like to share myself so vulnerably and still feel safe, and like be like, oh, I didn't die from doing that. And then to keep doing it throughout the program. It's like it threaded it through the program. So by the time that I got to the meetings, it's like I had come face to face with like what had happened and who I was. And I was so in love and fully had accepted that there was nothing else to do but just to exist and be myself. It's almost like you can't strategically figure all that stuff out. It's like you have to move through the spaces and piece it together and thread it together, and all that stuff, all the like internal work will eventually have you arrive at like, oh, and this is where I'm meant to be at this exact moment. And here I am. Like, I don't know if I would have had I don't think I would have had the foundation and the courage and the like being so clear about who I was when I sent the emails, no matter the responses during those meetings, if I had not gone through the space, if I had not let myself start with okay, here's my actor story, and I know that it's going to be valuable, and I'm really afraid of doing this, and I'm gonna let myself do it and
Totally.
just keep taking the next step and the next step. But yeah, that was, I mean, even the people who watched me do that story were so moved and so blown away and saw stuff about themselves, because of course they did. Like,
Yeah, of
because we're all
course.
humans and we're all
Yeah. And you remember, I'm sure when you're telling a story like that, and so for everybody who's listening, if you haven't caught on, like there's a part at the very beginning of the course where I ask you to tell your acting story and kind of your own relationship where you've intersected with this calling. And it's impossible when you're telling a story like that for someone who's hearing it not to go like, oh yeah, I had a teacher who was a dick, or I didn't have that opportunity, or someone said something to me that stuck with me, whatever. I appreciate you saying that's funny, Carly. It's funny and not funny, I guess. So many people say that it is the acting story. And it's also the place where people usually begin the course and can have a like, why do I have to do this? And I was like, I don't know. It's magic. Yeah, and by the end of the thing, you're going to be like, you're going to know exactly why you did it. And right. So, I mean, I know why, but I think that's one of the things that's so important. So to kind of round this out today, I know there are probably a lot of actors who are listening right now who were in the same place you were before you went through the agent goals process, or before this whole journey began. And what would you want to say to them what would you say to them?
Trust yourself, do whatever you need to do to love and accept who you are right now, just as you are, because whatever is meant to find you, there are reps and there are roles and there are opportunities that are meant to find you exactly how you are right now, no matter what your mind is telling you, no matter how much you say that's not true.
Yeah. No matter what that casting director said in that workshop you did 3 years ago that's still echoing in your ears, or that agent told you last year. I feel like that's a part of what I'm often talking to actors is they've heard one agent said one thing to them and it's stuck forever. And now I have to do this before I can ever reach out. So I really appreciate you saying that to cut through that noise. Yeah. Really.
Like they're the gatekeeper of the entire industry. Like
I love the laugh. Yes, exactly.
It's like, it's funny though,
Yes.
like even like I literally, out of all the emails I sent, I only had 2 responses that were a little like wonky.
Dickish? Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember like literally laughing because of where I was. Like, here's the thing that like we don't get. It's like if you're at a certain place where you actually authentically believe that you're not worthy, or where you're coming from is like, oh, like I suck, or da 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 da, then of course, if somebody says something to you that validates that, you're only going to get triggered and only going to get upset if you believe that.
Right.
But like, really, but if you're in
Yes.
this place where you've done the work, where you feel so grounded in yourself, like it literally doesn't matter what people say. Like it's almost laughable. Like I was so clear when those people sent the thing to me. I was just, and that's like was my biggest fear,
Sure.
like of like, so what somebody could say, right? That just like, oh my gosh, that's hilarious. I'm like, wow, they must be having a really hard day, like, or even like myself thinking like, wow, like I can't imagine what this person's life is if like this is like what they're, you know what I mean? Like I have no idea, like feeling compassion for them and saying thank you so much and get out of here, like releasing that, like bye.
Yeah. And Carly, I would everyone to hear that is that work is so, like the last thing we want is 2 emails out of the many, many you sent to be the one that tells you that you did a good or a bad job. Right. I want none of the emails to be able to give that kind of impression to you, or give that kind of reverberation inside the frequency that you're already at, that they don't even, don't let a dirty, what do they say, Liz? Don't let a dirty stranger walk through your house. I think that's a Buddhist thought. I'm not sure if I'm saying it exactly correctly, but like you would not let a dirty stranger. That's a good advice
though in general.
Right. Yeah, like you wouldn't let some dirty stranger, and you're like, I'm gonna let this dirty stranger walk through my mindset that I've never met before and say one email that's gonna say crappy things. Yeah. And yet I'm sure there are many people who are that crappy email that many of the listeners, I'm sure, received a crappy email at some point, and that crappy email has become the board of directors for their career of when they're allowed to reach out next and what credit they have to have first, or they have to have a referral, or da 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 da. And we just know that that's not true. So, Carly, I want to thank you so much for bringing so much honesty to this conversation. And it's been such a joy to watch you succeed in this way. I hate to use the word succeed sometimes. I don't know why, because I feel like it feels less natural, because the word success, sometimes we attach, like I think of the show Succession and like they're really just being aggro and aggressive. And that's not actually how we talked about this journey for you at all. It was much more around clarity and poise and the grace of acknowledgement of who you've been, and that is what attracted your reps ultimately. And it's such a journey. It's such a joy to witness, and a privilege, I would say, to be able to have seen how you went through this whole process. So thank you for allowing me just to be alongside you during this. So thank you so much. And for being on the pod today, obviously.
The pod.
The pod.
Well, thank you, Brian. Just so you know, I secretly was manifesting being a guest on this podcast. And I wasn't desperate about it or anything. It was just like, I felt connected to you. I felt really seen by you. Like, I felt like I didn't feel like you were like this like teacher up on this pedestal. I felt like we were like partners the whole way. Good. And I also just was like, I just want to like shoot the shit with Brian and like talk. Like, I could literally fill like probably like 10 to 15 podcast episodes with all the things that I like got from the course. And like, I love talking about my transformation. I love sharing it. I feel like when we share our triumphs, it has other people know that it's possible. It has them see things for themselves, whatever they're meant to see in their own life. So it's been an honor and a privilege to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now, listen, I'm sure thank you for that beautiful testament, I will just say. So I appreciate that very much. And I love what you said, like, please don't put me on a pedestal. I want to be right alongside. I really do want to feel like I'm alongside any actor that I connect with, any creator that I connect with, that I'm not, separate from, because I think that's A Course in Miracles, which is how I've been trained. I think for those of you who know, says you have one problem, and the only problem is that you think you're separate from others, and that there's only one of us here. And I think that is, can be whittled down into my belief, which is be kind at all costs, be kind. So I appreciate that. Carly, there are undoubtedly going to be some people listening who want to learn a bit more about you or want to follow you. Where would you tell them to go?
You can Google me, Carly Tatiana Pandža, and find all the things, the various platforms, all the things.
Great. Fabulous. And we will link to that below. You'll have the spelling of her name below. Thank you so much for today, Carly. I'm so grateful to know you and to have doing the pod together today.